Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see you here today and in such numbers. My name's Martin Ritchie. I'm the minister of the church here, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the church and our outreach team to this event, which is part of a series of arts, cultural events that we promote to connect with the community. And so it's really wonderful to see people here who are not from our church congregation, as well as church people, and to welcome you into this lovely space for what's going to be a remarkable event. And it came about kind of serendipitously. I think that's the best way. I love that. And it's one of my favourite words, that stuff just happens, basically. And Nora was connected to us through friends and family who are connected to this church. And we heard about her latest book and project, Muhammad Najem War Reporter, and we all thought, this is really intriguing. But we wondered whether there would be mileage to have an event around it here. And the more we explored it and the more we found out about Nora, the more remarkable it all seemed. And we were delighted when she agreed to come and do this kind of event for us, this conversation with Debbie Abitante, who is a long-standing family friend, and Debbie's a member of our congregation here. So there are lots of lovely connections. But of course, we're here to hear about a remarkable story which Nora has brought into the foreground here through the publication of this book that she co-authored. And it's a story that has great depth and great poignancy. And so we'll look forward to hearing more about that this afternoon. We have in the foyer a peace poll, and once you've heard about this book and the context, I think you may be moved to write something on this poll. If you're a praying type, you might want to make it like a prayer. If you are a reflective type, you might just want to write a message on it without any kind of faith dimension. But there are little strips of paper and pens. And if you'd like to write some kind of message around the desire for peace in the world, and particularly for Syria, then you're most welcome to do that on the way out. No matter how old you are, you're welcome to have a go at that. The peace poll is just in the narthex, the foyer, as you leave. If you'd like to hear more about our events and somehow you escape the clutches of the welcome team on the way in, and you're not yet on our events mailing list, you can join the list to receive emails, particularly about events. We will not bombard you with churchy stuff, but we will send you information relevant to those that are interested in arts and cultural happenings that we promote here. So you can do that on the way out if you'd like to. And if you'd like to help us out with our mission to put these kind of events on, then a few bucks in the plate is always welcome. But this is a free event. You don't have to do that. If you feel moved to do that, there is a plate in the narthex on the way out. Finally, before we welcome Nora and Debbie, we have our next event on the 26th of March. It's on a Sunday lunchtime at 12 noon. And it's part of our well-being strand, a strand of our events which is designed to explore how we might live well and better. And we have Danielle Lambert, who works for the Englewood Health in the area of really behavioural health management. And she's presenting a talk about when stress becomes distress, taking care of our emotional well-being. So that's an event that you might be interested in coming along to. Free to come, 12 noon in the church house through there on Sunday the 26th of March. There are flyers about that in the narthex on the way out. Now, for while you're really here, I'd like you to show a very warm welcome to Nora Neus and to Debbie Abitante.
I used to live a normal life, but when the war started, everything changed in my life. When the war started, I was 8 years old. My father had a store. He worked as a carpenter. He was having a normal life, quiet life. Everything turned like into hell. My school has destroyed completely. I lost a lot of people in my life. My father died in 2015. After 2 years, like I look at myself, my father loved to help people. I'm sure that if I did something that's helped people, he maybe would be proud of me. Then I got the idea of do some videos.
I am Muhammad Najem. I am 15 years old. It is my school which has become a target for Putin and Assad. You are killed by your silence. Bashar Assad, Putin and Khamenei killed our childhood.
I first stumbled across Muhammad's videos when I was working at CNN. I asked him questions, we verified his identity, and we published a story about him.
A human catastrophe is unfolding in eastern Ghouta, and a powerful voice emerging from the conflict is coming from a boy trapped inside the war zone. 15-year-old Muhammad Najem is calling what is happening in eastern Ghouta genocide, and he says global silence is allowing it to take place.
Overnight, it went viral. Muhammad was famous, but that put a target on his back. A few days later, the airstrike came. Muhammad and his family were buried alive. They dug their way out. Most of them survived, including Muhammad. Soon after, Muhammad and his family escaped Syria for Turkey, smuggling flash drives full of his original video reports across the border. Now an internationally famous journalist living in Turkey, Muhammad is still reporting, telling the truth about Syria. This is his story.
And I think this job, helping people, I'm sure if my father is still alive, he will be proud of me.
Hi. Every time I see this, I get goosebumps. Nora, thank you for asking me to have this conversation with you.
Of course.
I've witnessed your story since you were very, very young. And every time we've been together as close family friends and neighbors, there's been a twinkle in your eye when there's a story, whether it's an adult conversation, whether it's a book, a novel, or even a book that you created as a very young girl. So I feel that you have found such an amazing way to use your talents, and I'm so thrilled to share this opportunity to tell others about what you've done. So tell us about Muhammad.
Well, thank you. This is really special. I was trying to think of the last time that I've been in this church, and I think it's probably been like 10 years. But it's a good reason to be back here. Muhammad is really an incredible young man now. He's 20 now, and we'll hear from him in a little bit. But he is, I think, a real message to all of us that you don't have to be an adult to be making a change and be making an impact. You don't have to be famous. He became famous later, but that wasn't ever the goal, and that wasn't when he started out. And he is also a reminder that there are so many people caught up in these tragedies and in these conflicts that when we see the bombed out buildings on the news, it's hard to put a human face with that. But this is just one story, and there are millions more around the world that we're not telling.
And I was so moved by his appreciation. It's sort of a meta way of thinking that children are not only affected by conflict, but they have a story to tell. And he was very much an advocate for all children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's really never understood that he was a kid, you know? Like, he was like, yeah, I'm young, but I still have so much to offer, and we all have so much to offer, and like, why are you treating me like a child? And I think that's something, I definitely felt that way, I think, at a certain age. And I think there's also this impulse for Muhammad to tell the story of what was happening in Syria, with the idea and slight caginess that he thought that people might listen if he was like a cute kid. And that was like kind of like a purposeful strategy on his part. He was very smart as a teenager to do this.
And one very poignant and almost really sad point about that is that he believed once his story was told, the war would end. That if only people knew what was going on in Syria, everything would stop. And that's one of the moments that really tugs at your heartstrings as you read the book.
That's a scene in the book itself, But it's also something that has been really interesting about this project because, as you'll see in a moment, this started as a CNN report that I did for my job. I wrote an article, I edited together a little video in my apartment after work. This was just an extra kind of thing that I was doing. And his story kind of jumped through the screen when I first saw his videos, and we verified that he was who he said he was, because that's not always the case, unfortunately, in war zones. But we verified who he was, and we started talking. This was 2018. And at the time, I didn't understand that he thought once my article published, the war would be over. That once CNN showed the world what was happening to children, that, well, of course, the adults would step in and end the war, and then it must just be that people don't know what's happening here. And I didn't know that until I started interviewing him for the book. And that was as we became close friends and years later. And so there's a lot of things in the book and in our relationship now that I didn't know at the time, and that he wasn't going to share it with me at the time, because we didn't, it was more of a professional relationship. He was also still a minor. I was dealing mostly with his older brother and sister originally because they were, adults. But now, as he's gotten older and we've been able to have some of these conversations about what it was really like for both sides of us to be approaching this story, and now our stories have become so intertwined with each other's in a really interesting way. And so this started, maybe this is a good place to share, because I found his videos on YouTube, and he had a couple hundred likes, not like on his most popular one. The other had like a dozen. And he was just so compelling that we pitched this video. And so what we're gonna play for you now is the very first video, the very first CNN report about Muhammad.
I am Muhammad Najem. I am 15 years old. I live in the Eastern Ghouta. You are killed by your silence. Bashar Assad, Putin, and Khamenei killed our childhood. Medical situation in Eastern Ghouta was difficult to describe with words. What is happening now is genocide.
The children of Ghouta was out food and drugs.
People should know about everything happening in Syria. Before the war, I loved football so much. I was trained every day. I want to follow my studies. I want to become a reporter when I grow up.
So Muhammad's older brother, Firas, had been reporting for years. And all of a sudden, his kid brother hits this amazing story that catapults him into the world's view. Nora, how did you move from this one story that could have been kind of epic for the family in and of itself to all that happened after?
I was a really young reporter and didn't fully grasp the implications of doing a story like this, honestly. And he was living in rebel-held Syria. And there was a period of days before the story came out, and this is in the book as well, when he, like, from my perspective, totally ghosted me. And I thought, this happens all the time. People get cold feet about being on CNN. They disappear. But he was underground during bombing raids and had no cell service. And so a couple days later, he surfaced. He said, no, I definitely want to do this story with you. We need to tell the world what's happening. The story published. And I did not have a full understanding of the level at which he would become a target. It seemed like someone would say something if they were worried, but that's like kind of not how the world works. I have since realized, like, sometimes it's just up to you to say something if you're concerned. I thought one of the adults in the room would kind of step in, and I was an adult in the room. But the story published, and it went viral. The story, the important piece of there is it was translated into Arabic, and it was re-aired all over the Arab world. It was re-aired by the local Syrian rebel channel. And so he became incredibly recognized in Syria, but also throughout the Middle East and throughout the world. And it's hard to say exactly what happened. We don't fully know the full story. But what we know is that about 2 days later, after the article came out and after he became famous, and there were threats against his family made by the Assad regime, there was an airstrike that hit his street. It hit his neighborhood, his street. All signs point to it having targeted him directly and his family directly. And some of his family was killed in that strike, and he was buried alive and survived. And so when I found this out, I was in my kind of cozy New York City life. I felt very responsible and very guilty. And we stayed in touch, and we would still talk. It didn't seem like there was like much I could do at that point. And then he kept saying that he was glad he did the article, that he was glad that he had gotten some of the story out. And so we kept talking over WhatsApp and video calls and stuff, just stayed in touch. Eventually, he and his family were evacuated to northern Syria through a humanitarian ceasefire that was struck at the time with the UN. There was a couple days where people could travel. So they left very quickly. Eventually, they were able to go to Istanbul, Turkey, which is where they live now. So then just as soon as they moved to Istanbul, I got on a plane and went to go visit them. I felt really close to them because our stories had become so intertwined, because then also on my side of it, like, this was great for my career, right? Like, I had this huge viral story, one of my first stories that I did for CNN, but like, at what cost? And I was sitting there like enormously benefiting from this story in a way that had destroyed this kid's life. And so we stayed in touch, which I think we both were kind of surprised by. And his older brother and sister and I became very close friends. His older brother and I are 2 months apart. For us, who goes by Qusay also was his name when he was reporting out of safety. He used a fake name. And then his sister Hiba, who's also in the book, is like one of my like closest friends now. So I went to Turkey and visited them, and they made me Syrian food and Syrian breakfast, and we hung out, and we went sightseeing, and their English was good but not great, and so there were definitely times when they'd be like, "Here, get on this van. I'm gonna show you something," and then I'd have no idea where we were going. Sorry, Mom. And they just showed me around the Syrian neighborhoods in Turkey. And on that trip, I broached the topic of writing a book about his story and sharing that with the world further.
And I live day to day the stories of you're going to Istanbul, you're being there, you're coming home, and I knew the family the way I would know someone that you share stories about. But reading the book, I'm overwhelmed by this family, by the connectedness of their lives, their ability to maintain normalcy in spite of bombings and upheaval and so much. So the heartwarming part of the story is truly overwhelming, having watched this grow. And I wonder how much the graphic novel or the graphic memoir format helps draw the reader in?
That was something really intentionally that I wanted to do, was write a graphic novel. We have an incredible illustrator on this project named Julie Robine, who I have another book coming out with. She's working on that book right now. But we didn't know her at the time. She was hired by our publisher. And I felt like, and Muhammad agreed, that a graphic novel format was also kind of a way to soften the story slightly for a younger audience. But I originally wrote the book for a young adult age range. I originally wrote the book for slightly older readers, because there's some very traumatic stuff that happens in this book. I mean, he literally is buried alive, and it was a lot for me to write. It was a lot for me to hear even more about what happened. But I think it's also what he really went through at these ages. I met a young reader just before today who read the book and is 10 years old, and said that, I asked if it was too scary, because that's something I kind of worried about for like readers. And she said, well, no, that's just the reality of what he went through. And so I thought that was a very mature way of looking at it. And Muhammad was 11 when the war started. I mean, this is what he and children in Syria and children in Ukraine and children around the world are having to deal with in their day-to-day life. And for them, it's not some like wild and crazy thing that's happened. It's just like how their life is happening. And there's a scene in the beginning of the book that I should have put up, but I didn't, where he's playing video games, and he gets so mad because his parent, the Assad's government is closing in. You can see tanks rolling down the street. And they decide to flee. And they're getting packed up into the car, and he's so mad because they pull him off the computer in the middle of a level, and he didn't get to save his progress on the video game level. I mean, he's 11. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm at a key part here in this video game. And so we have old photos. There's an old photo in the back of the book of him on that computer when he's about that age playing his video games.
It's a great scene. Just a quick pause. How many of you have read at least one graphic novel or graphic memoir? Just raise your hands. Great. Wow. So you're familiar with the genre and the power of the genre.
There's a real divide within education right now about whether graphic novels are real books or not. And this is a conversation that has gone on for many years, since graphic novels became more than just comics, what we would traditionally think of as graphic novels. But it's also a way of getting reluctant readers interested in stories. It's also a way of communicating a very visual story that would be hard to tell in just words. And so we're going in a few minutes, I think, to read through some of the book and show you how that works in a graphic novel format. But it was something that we felt very intentional about choosing that platform. My pitch to Muhammad was that he could be like a superhero and have his own comic. So.
And I think at one point he said it was easy to read this book.
Yes,
he found it very readable.
He's not a big reader. And he also, English is not his first or second language. So he was trying to, in the beginning of reading it, he was like, oh, I actually like this one. I could read this. So.
Well, I know we have some journalism students from Tenafly High School and perhaps some aspiring novelists or writers. Nora, did you ever doubt that this could happen?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I still sometimes am shocked that it exists. I felt like this was kind of a wild idea, and I remember when I had written another book. I had written a completely different book that was a children's picture book, and gotten a literary agent and was going to sell this book, and thought that was my big shot to becoming an author, which was a dream I'd had since I was a kid. And I signed an agent even, and the book didn't sell. No publisher wanted it. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to write next, and if this agent still even wanted to represent me, because this had been like such a failure. And I said, we were having lunch, and we were talking through all my different ideas. And like at the end of lunch, like the check came, and I was like, okay, I have this crazy idea, not for now, but for like in 10 years when I'm a better writer, I have this idea for this book I want to write about this kid that I know. And it was like over the course of the check, and then we got coffee, that I pitched this book. But I was like, but I'm not going to write it now. Like someday when I'm older and wiser and speak Arabic and like I don't know how to do this, I will do this. And my agent really was like, wait, this is actually a phenomenal idea, and you should try to do this now. So I had no idea what I was doing. I was making this up as I was going along. I had never written a graphic novel. You write it basically like a movie script is the basic format. And at the same time, there were some family members back in Syria that we had to make sure were safe and potentially even out of the country before we could publish a book. There was a real concern over Salim, who is one of the boys in the book, who to this day is still in Syria, and over his safety. You will notice, like, very little identifying information about him in the book. I also was really worried that this would put even more of a target on him and his family's backs, and it did. The Assad regime is not a fan of this book. So it was worth doing, and that's something that Muhammad and his family and I have talked about. But he is now in Istanbul, Turkey, and he's now 20. And so I told him that I was coming here today, and he was very excited, and he actually sent a message that we're gonna play for you.
Hello, Tenafly in New Jersey. I'm sending you this message from Turkey. My name is Muhammad Najem. I'm 20 years old. I'm from Syria. Guys, if you know my story, you will know that I almost lived 7 years of my life in a war-zone areas. When the war started in my country at 2011, I was just 11 years old. I was a kid. But despite the horrible of war, despite that I've seen people I loved killed in front of me, despite that almost the whole country have been destroyed, on the other hand, I learned a lot of valuable lessons. Well, guys, without the war, I would never be the one who I am now. So I'm appreciating the war. Fighting for freedom is really deserved. Guys, you have to appreciate that you have freedom in your country. Believe me, life without freedom is not alive. So guys, I get out of Syria 2019. I get in trauma and a lot of problems, but I'm still fighting. Fighting for myself, for the people who I love, for my dreams. Surrounding is never gonna be a choice for me. If I'm surrounded, I will never taste what will look like. So guys, please fight for your dream, for the people who you love, and for yourself. Life is almost a battle. Every day we get in a battle and we should win. So go and win in your battle. You are strong and you can do it. I hope you're all doing well and have a good day. Muhammad Najem from Turkey.
So maybe we just jump into the book?
Sure. So we have two different sections that we're going to talk through today. And the first is, I think, kind of boils down what the book is really about in a way, and how I think I approach journalism and storytelling. So we're going to start with that. And you can look at the pictures as we go, and I'm going to read some of the captions and dialogue. Baba didn't get paid money for his work downtown, but he always brought something else home. Baba, did you hear any good stories today? Swallow, then speak. In fact, yes. You know what I always say? Everyone has a story. That's right. Everyone has a story, if you just ask. And today, I met a new neighbor. Ahmad just moved from Damascus. He's living in Salim's building, just down the street. Does he have kids our age? No, it's just him now. But before the revolution, he was a painter. He showed me pictures on his phone of portraits. They looked like photographs, they were so detailed. He lost all his paints. I talked to a group of men from the mosque. We're trying to find some new supplies for him, maybe even some canvas. Baba could talk to anyone, and once he heard their story, he had to find a way to help. Though I'm not sure there's any hope of canvas. Maybe we should collect some cardboard. Baba? Yes, my son? What happened to that man's family? The painter? They were killed, my son, in an airstrike. Here 1 minute, gone the next. Why must you talk to everyone you meet? You know why, because everyone has a story. No, I mean, that's a horrible story. Why do you want to know that? Well, I think it's important to help people feel seen, feel listened to, like they matter. I can't do anything to help his family come back, but I can listen to his past and feel his pain and witness his story. Sometimes that's the most important thing you can do for another human being. Good night, my son. I love you. I'll always be here to protect you, inshallah. Later in the book, Baba has died in an airstrike. He's killed while praying in the mosque. And this scene takes place, this next scene, right after they find out that he's been killed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Neither could Hiba. Do you think he's up there? Baba? Yes, is he with Allah? Absolutely, definitely. He was killed while he was praying. He's with Allah now. But what if we needed Baba more? I wish he were still here with us. I know, me too. Why is this fighting even happening? Why does our own president want to kill us? I don't know. But you know everything. No, I don't. But I do know what Baba would want us to do now. You do? So do you. What would Baba want us to do now? It hurt to even imagine Baba here again, standing over me with his hand on my head, telling me how to make sense of this. But the answer to Hiba's question was as clear as the night sky above. To help people in our neighborhood, to help people who need it, to ask them questions and listen to their stories, we can still make Baba proud, even though he's not here anymore. The stars were bright that night. Maybe it was Baba looking out for us, or maybe they were just balls of fire and gas dying out millions of miles away. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Baba was watching us, the twinkle in his eye, now a twinkle in the sky.
And telling other people's stories became Muhammad's work and his passion. Later in the book, he tells the story of Fatima. Mm-hmm. Tell a little bit about Fatima.
So Fatima is a little girl who the real picture of the real Fatima is actually in the back of the book, so you can see that. But there's an illustrated version of Fatima, and she has lost a leg in one of the airstrikes, in one of the bombings. And he decides to tell her story and share what happened to her. And enough people see his video that there's a collection taken up in the community. In the video, he has wanted to, the little girl has wanted to play with all the other kids, and she couldn't because she only had one leg. She was on crutches, but like not very good crutches. And she had said in the video, I really want a prosthetic leg. Like, did you know that in America, if you lose a leg, you can get a prosthetic leg? And he's like, yeah, no, I've heard of that. We even know kids that have gotten international relief who have that. And so enough people see the video, they raise a bunch of money, and they're able to buy Fatima a prosthetic leg, which wildly changes her life. And that was a kind of an aha moment for Muhammad of, okay, even if I can't end the war, I can do things to help people in my community, and I can make a difference in people's lives, even if I can't end the war.
And the power of storytelling. He also had a hard time not being in Syria after they were safely in Istanbul, and his friend Salim stayed in Syria and was sending images of what was still going on. And in getting over the crisis of not being in the moment, he discovered again that the important thing is to tell the story. And in a way, he was doing the same job he had always done. Mm-hmm. So I want to shift in the safety of Istanbul. There were moments where Muhammad would hear planes overhead and panic. And there's a really powerful moment where he feels the disconnection between his body and his mind. He knows he's safe, but adrenaline is just pumping through his body.
The Syrian neighborhood is a lower income neighborhood, as you can imagine. And so it is directly under the flight path to the Istanbul International Airport. So you have thousands of Syrian refugees living under low-flying planes at all times. And it is like devastating to their mental health.
Sound in the absence of a basement. It's so natural. And his younger siblings say, where's the basement? Because they've grown up in a smelly, dank basement. But the effects of war go on, and this book does a powerful job of showing how that happens. I think you have one more.
Yes, we have one more section to read from that kind of captures that trauma as well. And this is closer to the climax of the book. I've already kind of given away what's happened, so we're just going to lean into the spoilers here. This is a scene just after the article comes out, my article, and the video that you saw. They've just woken up in the morning. You okay? That's his elder brother for us. Yes, but I just have this feeling like it's gonna rain soon and the air feels heavy and full, like you can smell something about to change. You think it's gonna rain today? No, but it feels like something is coming. Something felt different that morning, like the center of gravity had shifted, like we were being watched. And then suddenly, there it came. For us, Hiba, come back. The first bomb bursts. This wasn't a warning shot. It felt like the plane was emptying everything it had. Get out of there. Another bomb bursts, and Muhammad sees a nearby shelter and runs down into the shelter. Qusay follows him down into the shelter, or for us. So they're down there together. And then, a few minutes later, it was as if it was happening in slow motion. I thought of Rakad buried alive. Faraz opened his mouth in a silent scream, but all I saw was a gray-covered figure, gray hair, gray skin, and gray face. Watch out for the bodies. Allah, help. Ah. That's the actual video that he took when he was buried alive.
So we're sitting with so much heaviness that we've all shared. There are also moments of joy. There's a wedding. There are births of siblings. And there's a pet parrot.
Yes. The pet parrot, no one wanted except for the kids. And they found this parrot kind of on the street, and it's a cute story of course, the dad falling in love with the parrot by the end. But there were a lot of moments of just normal childhood for them, too. The wedding scene is really special to me because it's Hiba's wedding, who's the sister, and we're basically the same age. The book came out 4 days before my wedding, and Hiba got married in wartime Syria, and so I was asking, all of these illustrations are based on photos. Everything in the book is like very, very, very accurate. But when it came time to share a picture of her wedding dress, she was like, oh, I hate this dress. I like really don't like it. It just was the one, it was the only one we had around. I mean, it was war, like I just found a white dress and wore it, but I really didn't like it. And so this was the one place where we fudged the truth. We let Hiba go online and find all of her favorite photos of her favorite wedding dresses and imagine her dream wedding dress. And I didn't put it up on the slide, but there is a scene in the book where she finally gets married, and it is her dream wedding dress that she gets to wear. And she has been so, I don't know if you can even see this really, but buy a book and you can see it for yourself. This is what she would have loved her dream wedding dress to have looked like. And it was a really fun moment and kind of redemptive moment in this book writing process because we were like, okay, we can give you your dream wedding dress for the whole world to see. So.
And playing off that, taking it back to Muhammad, there's a place in the wedding scene where he says, "In that moment, against all odds, I felt safe. Even within the darkness, there were moments of light, moments of joy, moments of peace. I realized that feeling had a name. It was hope." And this book just blends all these elements so beautifully. And I would selfishly love to keep talking with you, Nora, but I think it's time for us to hear from people who are listening and hear your questions. Anything you might want to know about the process of writing or the story itself. And we have someone with a microphone coming around. Thank you, Carolyn. If anyone has a question or comment.
I'll be nice.
Nora, so proud of you and what you've done to bear witness to those who bore witness is just such important work. How does one take this graphic novel, which is such a smart way, since the seed of all this was video. That's what caught your eye, video, and the red. And how does one take a graphic novel and allow a story to be portrayed in a shorter way, sort of a snapshot way, to pull it all together? Is there a means to shorten the story so it has even more legs?
We told the most important parts for the story, and there's a lot that didn't fit in the book. There is the biggest plot line that didn't fit in the book is that their family was in the chemical weapons attack that Obama famously drew the red line against. And they still are living with the effects of chemical warfare. Muhammad has really bad asthma and really bad lungs still. For us, was on the scene right after it happened. And still there was some of the gas in the air. That was a really hard one to let go of for the book because it impacts a lot of them, but it didn't impact this story that we were trying to tell. And that was something that we had to cut out to make it this length. So it's like not wrong what happened. Everything in the book is true, other than the wedding dress. But also there's way more that didn't fit in the book. So that was hard. We want to make a documentary about his story. And so that very first video you saw is our kind of trailer for what a documentary could look like about his life.
Then if you put it on YouTube or monetize it or GoFundMe or something,
yeah.
It has such legs and it's just done so well.
Thank
Bravo.
you.
Hi, we're the editors of the Tenafly school newspaper, and so while we haven't yet been tasked with writing a story of such magnitude yet, there have been times where we've written pieces that have had backlash from administration or other things. So kind of what advice do you have for writing a story that could be perceived as controversial?
I mean, number one, great job. If you're already getting backlash from administration, like you're all the way there. That's awesome. One of my first, the very first story I did as a local news reporter, my very first story was 2 days after Christmas in Charlottesville, Virginia, and it was a kind of negative story about this gun factory that had moved into town. And the owner of the gun factory called me the next morning and was so angry at me for doing this negative story about this gun factory. And it wasn't even really negative, I just was pointing out that maybe it's problematic to have a gun factory next door to a school. But far be it for me to say. I went into work and was crying and was like, oh my gosh, it was my first day of work as a reporter, and I was crying, and my boss, who was almost 7 feet tall, was like, it's okay, if someone's mad at you, that means you're doing something right. And I'm such a people pleaser, I hate that, and I hate anyone ever being upset with me for anything, but sometimes it's worth it.
if you're making the right people mad. I'm okay if the Assad regime hates me. That's something I feel okay about.
Thank you.
If Gary is going to go, I can tell a story of the time that I started a magazine in 4th grade. And on the playground, I would go around and assign my friends articles to write for the playground. And then I would put them all into a newspaper. And then my idea was I was going to sell it. And Gary was a professional artist. And I was like, what this newspaper needs to sell is a cartoon section. And so I hired Gary for 50 cents. Which was the cost of one edition, so I figured I could make that money back pretty fast, to make a custom cartoon for the back of my newspaper called Fashion Emergency. And you did, and you took me very seriously. I think you made me sign a contract. I think we had like a real agreement. And then I got tired of that project and moved on before I ever finished it. But thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Nora. I wanted to, first of all, I reread your book this morning from cover to cover, and it's just so touching and heart-wrenching to read through this story. It's just remarkable. I remember reading that you covered military studies when you were in school, and I just wondered if you had a feeling like there was a meant-to-be quality to you writing such a wrenching story about a war zone. Or whether you ever, back then, whether you had journalism in your sights or what have you.
I was really interested in politics, and I mean, clearly since I was a kid, I was interested in journalism, but I never thought it would be my job. I was really interested in politics and in policy and government. A lot of that, I was telling my spouse this morning, how I ended up getting interested in politics and government, and it was entirely because of my high school teacher, Ms. Fair, who's here. Ms. Fair was the reason that I fell in love with government and politics and policy. And that was a lot of why I ended up being really interested in war studies as well, as a way to look at what's happening around us, but also the ways it intersects with like real life. So my research I have a master's in war studies, and my dissertation research was about how media covers terrorism and whether we are doing the job of the terrorists to terrorize people by reporting on media and reporting on terror attacks. But also you can't not report on a terror attack, like it's news. So how do you report on a terror attack in a way that isn't just serving the propaganda aims of the terrorists? And so that definitely played into this, and even to the extent of like, I am going to produce very nice, high-quality illustrations of the havoc that is wrought by the Assad regime. I was worried that, and I still sometimes am worried that some of the stuff in the book could be used as propaganda by the other side. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah. I just also want to say a call out to Julia Robin for doing such magnificent drawings.
She brought it to life. Yes. The emotions of the book wouldn't have been the same without Julie.
First of all, I just want to say, I think the book reads like a thriller. I mean, it's one of those things I just couldn't put down once I started it. And even reading it over again, it was the same thing. So it's just brilliant. Two things. How did you end up getting your job at CNN? Which I kind of know, but I think everybody else would love to hear it. And also, if you could tell us a little bit about your new book that you're working on.
Sure. And maybe I'll answer the second one first, because I'm going to be back here in August. If you would like to return, if you've had fun today. In August, you can come hear about my next book, which is also kind of a heavy topic. It's an adult book that is an oral history of the white nationalist riots in Charlottesville in 2017. I was there, I was a reporter in Charlottesville. I was there for most of that week and the next weekend. And it's the story of resistance against white supremacy. And then what will be my third book coming out, but actually was the second book I wrote, is my book with Julia Robin, which is a young adult story based on a true story of a teen girl who, in 1888 New York City, who infiltrated the garment factories in New York City and exposed them for their disastrous practices. So that will be coming out in 2025, 4. I'm not sure, it's not done yet. Yes, there's that one. And then so the first one, this is a longer story, but I ended up, I don't even know how to tell this story. I was in Washington, D.C., and there was what we thought was an attack on the Capitol building. And it ended up being an irate Florida mailman who was trying to protest campaign finance reform, but did it in a way that made everyone think it was a terror attack because he came down in a helicopter. And I was there and saw it happen, and when the CNN camera showed up, I was the only one telling them like what had happened. I was a college student, and so I did this interview with Anderson Cooper on the CNN on TV that night about what had happened, and they offered me an internship for that summer. And so I went and interned for Anderson in New York that summer, and then he offered me a job after college. And then I worked for him for a couple years after college. So.
And you've done that for Muhammad. You've given Muhammad the chance to blossom as a journalist. Oh, there's one more question. Great. Carolyn. And
Hi, Nora. It's so great to see you up here and hear about a writer sharing such a poignant story. But it reminds me of Anne Frank and her telling the story of what it's like for a young person to go through war. And it sounds like Muhammad, it's such an impactful way of teaching adults and children about what the devastating of war. And I remember how much reading Anne Frank hit me, and I think your book could have that potential for touching young people to realize that war is not glory. It's so impactful on people's lives, and I thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. That is quite a compliment. I think that was Muhammad's aim as well. I was in Ukraine at the beginning of the war, reporting, and we were interviewing a bunch of kids, and it always struck me that it was the kids' stories that were more impactful, because like an adult, you can kind of rationalize a little bit, but when it's a kid going through it, it does like kind of bring it home in a different way.
And related to that, on a lighter note, Muhammad coached you on war reporting, right?
Well, yeah, I got sent to Ukraine, and I had never been to an active war zone, and so I called Muhammad and was like, "What am I doing? How do I do this?" And he actually gave me some very legitimate and good advice, which was don't get caught up in the larger insanity of what's happening, and don't focus on like how unsafe you are and the fact that there could be an airstrike at any minute, which there was when I was there, but focus on what it is you're doing at any given moment, and just like put one foot in front of the other. And then he said, don't be slow. And I said, what's that? He's like, if you have to run fast. Like, okay.
Don't be slow.
That was terrific. I'm very happy to see where you are today, Nora. I was wondering, what kind of input did Muhammad have in the process of putting this book together? Were you like doing writing and then having him take a look, or did you just decide to do the writing and then you have him look at it later on? So I was interested in that.
Yeah.
And then the second question is that for your book coming out in 2024 or 2025, how do you put yourself in the place of you're writing about a girl. How do you put yourself in the place of a deceased person? Somebody that you only read about. So how are you going to approach that story?
Yeah,
first person, or are you going to do it as a outside observer?
That's a good question, but on both of those. Having Muhammad's input was incredibly important to this story, and that was something that we felt very strongly about. His name being on the byline, his name is first on the cover. So we had a very collaborative process. So when I was in Turkey, we spent a lot of time talking about the overall structure of the book and the story, what he felt comfortable talking about. We had a lot of conversations about his the depiction of his sister and his mother, and to what extent they felt comfortable with being illustrated. They did not feel comfortable with photos being shared of them, but illustrated. There were a couple of really interesting questions even there where there's a couple of scenes in the book where they're in their home with only their family, and the women are wearing hijabs because this is a public presentation of this story. And so in real life, they would not have been wearing hijabs with only their family in the kitchen. There's a couple of different scenes like that, but that was something that we all felt very strongly about because they were not interested in having any depiction of them without a hijab, for example. So there were a lot of those kind of questions, and then there were a lot of interviews. I interviewed Muhammad at length and all the family members. There were multiple stories where Muhammad would tell me one version, and then all the other family would be like, no, he was terrified, and would tell me the real story, or vice versa. So then I would write a draft. I would go to Muhammad, and I would often read the draft to him, and then he and his family would go through it. And then the same thing we did with illustrations. And so we didn't totally get to this, but actually if we have a slide next, I think, that is, these were all of the different concepts for the title, for example, for the cover. So this was the sketches from Julie, and we asked his opinion, which one he liked better. And then if you go to the next slide, so that was the concept and then the final. And one thing, and then this here is, we can go ahead. This is the sketch first, and all the sketches would go through Muhammad and their family, and they definitely told us when something was wrong or wasn't right, or they just wanted them to look better in a certain part. And then the middle is just the ink, and then so that we had more of an ink level work, and then the color of the final page. There's the pet parrot. Not a pigeon, I'm from New York. The pet parrot. Oh, and then the second question for the next book, I decided to write that one as historical fiction. I didn't have enough sources on this real person's life. It also was an alias. She wrote under an alias at the time because it wasn't proper for society women. She was a society woman to write. So I know very little about her life. So it's historical fiction inspired by her life, but not fully accurate.
Hi there. So it's really cool to have another graphic novel for the older young adults, so thank you for doing this. My question is, how's Muhammad now? What's he doing? What are his goals for the future? What are his dreams? And you discussed how this has benefited you. How now is he maybe benefiting, maybe in a more positive way, from your story and his story combined?
Yeah, he's doing really well, and also it's a hard life to be a refugee in a foreign country. He is doing really well. He and his brother are still living in Istanbul. They are reporting extensively on what's happening in Syria. They've been doing a lot of earthquake-related reporting in the last couple of weeks. And they have a really great network. He is very famous, and so, especially over there, and so I would walk around with him on the street or on the metro, and people would recognize him and stop him and ask for pictures. And especially among the Syrian community, he's seen as the hero, the boy hero who told the world what was happening. He would love to go to college. They all stopped going to school when the war started. He was educated up until he was 10 years old and nowhere past that. And so schools in Turkey are in Turkish. So it's just those kind of questions are really hard. He would love nothing more than to come to the US, and our great country will not allow him to enter because he doesn't have a passport. He could go to the Syrian consulate in Istanbul and request a passport. However, he has been blacklisted by the Assad regime. And also, if he's on Syrian soil at the consulate, they could try to kill him. So he is a little bit stuck. If anyone knows anyone that can help me get him a visa, let me know. We would love to bring him to the US and his brother. They would go to any country, any country that would take them, because they're not Turkish citizens, they're refugees in Turkey, so they're not allowed to work officially. They're in kind of a rough situation, but also they're doing really well. So what you saw of him in the video is so real. I will try to have an honest conversation with him about like what he's gonna do next, and he's always like, no, it's okay, like it'll be fine, like I'm going to change the world. I'm like, I agree, I fully agree. So he's doing well.
And his father is proud of him.
Yes.
And I just want to close by rereading what Nora read earlier from Baba, his father, just very shortly before the strike that killed him praying in the mosque. I can't do anything to help his family come back, but I can listen to his past and feel his pain and witness his story. And Nora, you're witnessing this story and so many others is really a gift. So thank you for sharing with us today, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We do have books for sale. There are paperbacks and hardbacks, and there's a recipe in the back from this church's own Debbie Abitante, who is also Debbie's daughter, adapting one of Heba. We worked with Heba to adapt one of her favorite recipes for stuffed grape leaves, which is in the back of this. So we would love to have you come get a book as well.
And those of us who have read it more than once, so we really encourage you to enjoy.
And if you're not in a financial situation to be buying a book, come and ask for one and we'll give you one.